The village awoke each morning with the rhythm of drums in the distance, their beats carrying the stories of ancestors through the warm, dusty air. Children ran barefoot along narrow paths, chasing chickens that clucked in protest, while elders sat beneath the ancient baobab trees, their eyes sharp and watchful, noting every gesture, every word. Modern shops with bright signs competed with thatched huts, and the hum of new desires threaded through the old customs, creating a tapestry where tradition and change danced uneasily side by side. In the marketplace, voices collided like waves against rocks. Vendors called out the day's prices, colors of cloth dazzling the eyes, while the scent of spices and fresh fruit filled the air. Gossip wove invisibly through the crowd. A misstep, a glance, a borrowed coin became fodder for whispers. Respect was not simply given, it was earned, and shame spread like wildfire, carried from one ear to another before anyone could catch their breath. The laws of the village were unspoken but understood. A marriage was not merely the joining of two hearts but the honor of entire families, a reflection of loyalty and dignity. To dishonor a wife was to dishonor the ancestors themselves, and every neighbor, elder, and passerby kept a careful watch. Amara moved quietly through this world, her gentle eyes holding pain she never voiced. Her strength was silent, protected beneath the veil of her wig, hiding the loss of hair that symbolized a deeper wound. She carried her dignity carefully, a quiet fortress against the shifting judgments of a society that measured worth with scrutiny. Kofi, once warm and tender, now walked with a heavier pride. Wealth had gilded his heart with arrogance, and with every new possession, his gaze drifted further from the love that had once bound him. Gratitude became comparison, affection twisted into expectation, and the light in his eyes dimmed beneath the weight of status. Celine glided into the village's periphery like a song of temptation, her beauty sharp as the sunlight on metal. Bold, confident, she embodied modern perfection and the dangerous allure of desire. Her presence made hearts flutter and loyalties waver, a test that even the strongest could not easily resist. At home, Kofi's growing pride planted seeds of disrespect. Words once soft and loving turned sharp, glances once filled with warmth now measured judgment. Every gift, every show of wealth, slowly eroded the foundation of their bond. Love became a ledger of comparison, and the heart that had once celebrated Amara's quiet strength now demanded more than she could give, unaware that true honor could never be bought. Amara felt the weight of the house pressing down on her chest, though no one spoke of it aloud. She watched Kofi laugh with Celine, his words sharp and careless, yet she said nothing, holding her tongue like a shield. Inside, her heart trembled with pain, but she carried it silently, each step measured, each glance careful. "Patience, Amara," she whispered to herself. "The river carves the stone, and so will time reveal truth." She adjusted her wig gently, the thin crown that masked the wound she bore, and carried on with the chores that anchored her to dignity. Rumors began to travel like dust in the dry wind, rustling through narrow streets and alleyways. Mothers whispered to daughters, shopkeepers muttered behind counters, and children paused mid-laughter, sensing the tension that floated unseen. "Have you heard?" one voice asked another, low and trembling. "Kofi has betrayed her," came the reply, voices sharp with curiosity and judgment. The village, as it always did, became both jury and storyteller, spreading the tale in waves that reached every ear, weaving shame into the air like a stubborn smoke. The market pulsed with life that day, colors bright, spices sharp, the chatter of trade rising in clamor, but beneath the normal hum, tension crackled. Kofi's hand moved too quickly, his words too loud, and the murmurs of gossip turned into sharp gasps as he seized Amara's wig in a sudden, brutal gesture. Hair fell in a heap to the ground, her secret laid bare before the crowd. Faces froze. Mouths opened and closed in disbelief. Children stopped running. Sellers held their hands mid-count. Silence fell heavier than the beating of any drum, a hush that pressed on every heart in the market. Amara stood rigid, shoulders trembling but eyes unwavering, the mask of her fear replaced by a quiet, unyielding strength. She was exposed, her pride and pain naked before her people, but she did not cry. Kofi's face, once proud and commanding, twisted as he sensed the first fissures in his soul. The applause of arrogance faded. The first crack in his spirit had begun, unnoticed by him but seen by the elders and whispered through every corner of the village. The market would remember, and so would the hearts of those who witnessed the fall of both dignity and honor that day. The market that once hummed with life now stirred with whispers, each voice carrying the weight of judgment. Some spoke with pity, shaking their heads, murmuring, "She did not deserve this." Others' words were sharper, edged with mockery. "A wife, exposed. How could she hide her shame?" From stall to stall, the gossip traveled, twisting like the wind through narrow alleys, settling into every listening ear. The bright fabrics and fragrant spices of the market could not mask the tension. The air itself seemed heavy with the unspoken verdict of the town. The elders stood at the edges, their faces grave, eyes meeting in silent understanding. A subtle nod, a tightened jaw, a glance exchanged, these were words in themselves. Kofi's act was no small misstep. It was a deep violation of the sacred bonds that held families and villages together. Respect for marriage, for the dignity of a woman, for the traditions passed down like the rhythm of the drums, each had been wounded. The elders' silence spoke louder than any shouting could, their condemnation weighing like a stone on the hearts of those who witnessed the act. Amara moved through the crowd with quiet strength, her steps measured and steady. She did not cry, nor did she plead. Each movement was a testament to the endurance of her spirit. Though her pain was raw, she carried it as one carries a precious stone, close to the chest, hidden from prying eyes. The murmurs followed her, but she walked on, refusing to allow the crowd to feast on her suffering. And yet, the market remembered. Long after the voices had faded, long after the stalls were packed away and the sun dipped low, the tale lingered in the air. Mothers would recount it to daughters, shopkeepers would warn apprentices, and children would learn the lesson without ever seeing the act themselves. A single moment of dishonor had etched itself into memory, transforming the place of trade into a place where shame endured far longer than joy. When the shame touched Amara, it did not remain hers alone. Her family felt the ripple, the trembling of a name once held high. Neighbors whispered of her lineage, measuring the dignity of her forebears against the public exposure of their kin. A father's sigh, a mother's worried glance, the quiet shame of siblings, they all felt the weight of a woman's suffering mirrored in the honor of a family. The community, once a source of warmth, now reminded her that the bonds of kin carried both protection and responsibility, and that one woman's fall could threaten the roots of all she came from. She returned to the compound of her mother, stepping across the threshold of her childhood home as if returning to a sacred river. The familiar walls, the scent of dry earth and cooking fires, the soft rustle of palm fronds outside, each offered a balm to her aching heart. Her mother met her gaze without words at first, letting the silence speak. Then, in tones gentle yet firm, she reminded Amara of the strength in her bloodline, the courage and endurance, the wisdom of ancestors who had faced storms and never broken. "Your roots must hold, my daughter," her mother said, pressing a hand over Amara's. "The wind may tear at the branches, but the roots endure. True strength is not in the crown you wear, but in the spirit beneath it." In that embrace, Amara felt a seed of hope. The pain remained, but it no longer ruled her. She understood, as her mother had always taught, that dignity is cultivated in silence, courage is nurtured in endurance, and honor is preserved not by the eyes of the crowd, but by the unyielding spirit that carries a woman through even the harshest of storms. The wind carried more than dust through the village that day. It carried stories of hair, of pride, of dignity lost. In Amara's home, her hair, once a crown woven with patience and care, had been hidden beneath a wig, not just to shield beauty, but to guard the spirit that belonged to her. It was not simply strands of silk and strength. It was the measure of who she was, the thread that connected her to ancestors, to the wisdom of mothers who had endured storms without breaking. Its absence, revealed to the world, became a symbol of stolen dignity, a quiet wound that spoke louder than any cry. Kofi, intoxicated by applause that echoed too loud, felt himself a king among men. The laughter and admiration of Celine fed his arrogance. "See how the world bends to me," he whispered one night, brushing past the empty eyes of his once loving neighbors. The power he mistook for triumph grew heavier with each approving glance, each whispered promise of influence, and the cruelty he wielded became a trophy he carried as if it were gold. With Celine by his side, he embraced the glow of false glory, moving boldly through streets and parties, a man who believed he had risen above his past and its quiet reminders. Yet even in the brilliance of wealth, small cracks began to form. Contracts slipped, debts multiplied, and the fortune he had so proudly amassed faltered in subtle ways that whispered, not yet loudly, that dishonor never yields true prosperity. The village, once warm with familiar smiles and nods of respect, turned cool. Greetings became brief, eyes averted. Doors that had opened readily now closed softly, and the elders, silent judges of moral law, excluded him from gatherings, the unspoken verdict more piercing than any scolding. Surrounded by fine clothes, sparkling dinners, and lavish houses, Kofi felt a hollow echo within. Luxury filled his hands, but could not fill the emptiness of a heart stripped of respect. Alone, he realized, too late, that the bonds he had broken, the sacred trust of marriage and community, had erected walls no coin could buy down, leaving him in the stark solitude of a man who mistook cruelty for power and applause for honor. The first morning after the shame had fallen like a heavy cloth over her shoulders, Amara did not cry. She rose slowly, each movement deliberate, as if the ground itself might crumble beneath grief. Yet beneath the quiet tremor of her heart, a seed of resolve took root. She whispered to herself, "I will not let this break me." With careful hands, she removed the wig that had hidden her secret for so long. The wind kissed her bare hair, and for the first time, she felt the truth of her strength. It was not in hiding, but in standing, even when the eyes of the village lingered with pity or curiosity. Neighbors who once turned away in judgment now saw her walking through the market, head held high. Women paused in their work to watch, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles of recognition. Slowly, Amara began to speak to them, sharing the weight she had carried alone, offering guidance, listening without condemnation. "You are not less for the storms you endure," she told one young mother, whose own veil of shame was nearly as heavy as hers had been. The village began to shift. Where whispers had once spread dishonor, now admiration stirred. Stories of her courage traveled from compound to compound, across firelit evenings, carried in song and in conversation. Children learned that dignity could be reclaimed, and mothers saw in Amara an example of endurance turned into wisdom. When women gathered around her, a circle of strength formed, unbroken and unwavering. The elders, observing this transformation, began to speak with authority once silent. "Honor must be defended," they said, pointing to the example of the woman who refused to be diminished. And in that circle, the village understood that shame could be transmuted into respect, and the voice of one woman, when lifted with courage, could awaken the conscience of all. The sun rose over the village like a storyteller awakening, casting golden light over clay walls and winding streets. Yet not all light shone brightly. Celine, once admired for her beauty and charm, now moved through the community like a shadow of shame. Whispers followed her, once praising her elegance, now questioning her complicity in Kofi's cruelty. Mothers shook their heads, elders exchanged knowing glances, and the children stared with quiet curiosity. Beauty without respect, the villagers murmured, turns into disgrace. Kofi, draped in silks and surrounded by wealth, felt the first sting of emptiness. The gold of his house, the sparkle of his jewelry, and the applause of city acquaintances no longer filled the void that had begun to gnaw at him. He walked past familiar compounds and noticed nods replaced by silence, greetings cold and measured. Money could not buy back a lost name. He felt a hollow glow around him, the laughter of luxury failing to reach the corners of his soul. Then, like a ripple in still water, he heard of Amara. Tales of her courage, her unwavering dignity, reached his ears in hushed tones carried by those who had once pitied her. A shadow of discomfort settled over him. Pride weakened, guilt crept in like dusk over the hills, quiet but undeniable. He was not yet ready to bow, yet the seeds of reflection had been sown. The drums called that evening, deep and steady, announcing the festival of honor. The elders took their seats beneath the shade of ancient trees, their eyes sharp, measuring deeds against tradition. Villagers gathered in circles, the scent of roasted yams and palm wine filling the air. At the heart of the gathering, Amara was called forward. She walked with the strength of one who had endured, her bare hair kissed by the wind, eyes shining with quiet fire. The crowd fell into a respectful hush. Where shame had once ruled, now honor awaited her. The storyteller's drumbeat echoed her journey, from pain to resilience, from silence to being heard. Elders nodded, whispers of pride passing from one to another. Kofi, standing at the edge of the assembly, felt the weight of actions that could not be undone, while Amara, once hidden in shadow, now carried the sun in her steps. The village, alive with tradition, bore witness. Respect, once lost, could rise again through courage, and truth, though delayed, always found its place before the people. The morning sun bathed the village square in gold, but Kofi felt no warmth. He strode in, his chest puffed with pride, robes flowing like rivers of silk, expecting the nods, bows, and words of admiration he had long been accustomed to. Yet the marketplace, usually alive with chatter and laughter, greeted him with an eerie quiet. Children paused mid-step, merchants lowered their eyes, and neighbors whispered behind palms. His wealth, his charm, his past deeds, none could force respect from those whose hearts had grown wary. He stopped, searching for a familiar smile, but the silence spoke louder than the drums of any festival. Each unspoken judgment weighed upon him, heavier than any chain, echoing the truth he had long tried to ignore: respect cannot be bought. From the far side of the square, Amara emerged. The wig that had hidden her pain was gone, revealing her hair in its natural glory. She walked steadily, each step a drumbeat of resilience, each lifted chin a proclamation of courage. Her eyes met the villagers, no shame clouding their recognition, only admiration. Slowly, the people closed in around her, forming a circle of honor, hands raised in greeting, voices whispering blessings instead of gossip. The elders stepped forward, their canes tapping a rhythm older than memory. "Hear the law of the ancestors," one began. "Dignity is a pillar. Respect is a river. Loyalty, a bridge that carries a family across storms. Break these, and you break the bond that holds the people together." The words cut deep, precise as spears, leaving Kofi unnamed yet unmistakably condemned. He felt the cracks form in his pride, a slow fracture under the weight of truth. Amara stood in the center, radiant and whole, while he, surrounded by gold and empty applause, realized for the first time that power without honor is a lonely cage, and that courage, not cruelty, earns the heart of the people. Kofi stood at the edge of the village square, his eyes finally seeing what the mirrors of wealth and vanity had never shown him. In the polished gold of his rings, in the shimmer of his fine clothes, he saw nothing but hollow reflection. His heart, once proud with self-importance, now trembled as he recognized a truth older than the village itself. Beauty lies not in perfection or luxury, but in loyalty, in kindness, and in respect freely given. He took a step forward toward Amara, but the ground seemed to resist him. Invisible chains of guilt wrapped around his ankles, pulling him back with every stride. The villagers' gazes, steady and unyielding, formed a living barrier. Mothers holding children, elders leaning on their staffs, youth standing shoulder to shoulder, they created a wall no man could cross. Forgiveness could not be demanded. It must be earned, and he had yet to prove worthy. Celine's confident smile faltered. She felt the shift, the subtle turning of winds as admiration left Kofi and returned to its rightful owner. Her hand slipped from his arm, her gaze cooling. The illusion that had bound them, flashy wealth, fleeting charm, crumbled like dry clay, revealing the true measure of worth. In the center of the square, Amara lifted her chin, the sunlight catching the natural curve of her hair, the strength in her stance, the dignity in her eyes. She was reborn from shame into strength, a living testament to endurance and courage. Around her, whispers of admiration began to rise, voices echoing the lesson that true honor comes from the soul and not from fleeting appearances. The village, once a place of judgment, now became a place of reverence, as a woman reclaimed her name and her people recognized the value of integrity over illusion. Amara sat beneath the ancient baobab tree at the edge of her mother's compound, the wind playing gently with her hair. For the first time since the shame of the market, a deep calm settled in her spirit. She no longer measured herself by Kofi's fleeting approval or the whispers of the village. The eyes that had once judged her now felt distant, and with each breath, she let go of the weight of expectation. Her heart hummed a quiet song, one that spoke of resilience and self-worth, a melody older than any man's pride. Meanwhile, Kofi wandered the streets he once commanded with swagger. The houses that had greeted him with respect now offered only cold silence. Celine, too, had vanished into the gossip of fading admiration, leaving him with nothing but his own reflection staring back, a hollow man draped in fine clothes, yet stripped of dignity. He felt the sharp ache of pride that had once demanded submission and flattery, now replaced with emptiness. The village square, once a place of applause, now echoed only with the sound of his footsteps. Each step was heavy, a rhythm of reckoning. In that quiet, truth began to settle like rain in dry earth. Kofi approached Amara at the threshold of her home, his voice soft, shaking. "Amara, I have come not to reclaim, but to seek peace." She turned slowly, eyes steady, calm, and measured. She listened, offering the grace of hearing without yielding the gift of forgotten pain. Her silence spoke louder than words. Forgiveness could be offered, but trust must be earned, and some scars carry their lessons for life. Amara nodded once, a gentle acknowledgement, and Kofi felt the first stirrings of humility. For the first time, he understood that respect is not bought, love is not owed, and redemption begins only when one faces the consequences of their own heart. The elders sat beneath the wide, sheltering arms of the old Irako tree, their eyes steady and knowing, their silence carrying weight heavier than words. As the wind rustled through the leaves, it seemed to carry a message, a lesson older than memory, that every action, every betrayal, and every act of courage leaves a mark upon the world. The villagers listened without knowing it, their hearts touched by the unspoken story that moved like a river through the town, shaping thoughts and choices without a single syllable spoken. Amara walked through the marketplace, her head held high, no wig to hide her hair, no fear to bend her spirit. Beauty that lives beyond the eyes of others now shone from within her, a radiance of courage, endurance, and integrity that could not be measured by appearances. Those who had once whispered behind her back now bowed with respect, offering smiles and nods of admiration instead of judgment. The same market that had borne witness to her humiliation became a place of quiet celebration, a living testament to strength and perseverance. Step by step, Amara moved along the sunlit path where shame had once shadowed her, each footfall a drumbeat of honor. Children paused in wonder, mothers whispered lessons to their daughters, and even the elders' eyes glistened with pride. She had returned, not as the victim of cruelty, but as a living story of dignity restored. And in the soft, lingering hush of the village, a final lesson settled over all who had watched. What a man breaks, time must judge. Justice is patient, justice is wise, and in the hands of life itself, every betrayal finds its reckoning. The winds carried this truth, and the village would remember it for generations, whispered to the ears of those who came after, a tale of pain, courage, and the enduring power of honor.